1. Let's start off with simplifying radicals with negative radicands. So we've done this category before. If you look at the website, you'll actually find the video for it, but I'll just give you a refresher once it loads. There we go. Okay, so we're going to rewrite the square root of negative 63 in simplest radical form. So when you're given this radical with a negative in it, what we can do is take out a perfect square. So what are perfect squares? To remind you what perfect squares are, please excuse my messy handwriting. Think about like 1 squared, that's 1, 2 squared, that's 4, 3 squared, that's 9, and then, sorry, that's a 9, and then 4 squared, that's 16, and you can continue this if you were just to keep squaring numbers. And so these numbers on the right side that I'm circling right here, these are perfect squares. So we want to think about which of these can fit into 63. So you can just try it out on your calculator. You want to do 63 or negative 63 divided by, let's try 16. Let's pretend I don't know which perfect square fits in. So I'm going to try 16. I'm going to try from the bigger one. Does 16 fit into negative 63? If it does, I should get a whole number. But instead I get 3.9375, not a whole number. So does not fit. Let's try 9 now. So negative 63 divided by 9. And then if you try that out on your calculator, just pretend like you don't know what it is, then you get negative 7. And that's a whole number. So you know that 9 fits into 63. So 9 is a factor of 63. So that means we can rewrite the square root of negative 63 as the square root of negative 9 times the square root, sorry, there's a times the square root of 7, because 9 times 7 gives you 63. I'm going to pause here and see if you guys have any questions. Okay, so we have the square root of negative 9 times the square root of 7, and so we can simplify the square root of negative 9. Remember that the square root of 9 is 3. However, this is a negative number, and we learned that the square root of negative 1 is the imaginary number I. So in case you forgot that, now you remember if you square root a negative, you have to get I in there. So now we have that the square root of negative 9 is 3I, and then we just write that this is times the square root of 7 because we haven't changed that. So your final answer is 3I square root of 7. Are there any questions? So I'm going to go ahead and type 3I square root of 7 in as my answer and submit. Okay, so let me go on to clear the screen. And on to the next problem. And then turn back on my annotations. It's a lot of buttons to click, I'm sorry. Okay, so now we're going to rewrite the square root of negative 125 in the simplest radical form. Once again, we want to think about what perfect squares fit into this. Remember, the perfect squares are 1 squared, 2 squared, sorry, that looked ugly, 3 squared, 4 squared, 5 squared, and so on and so forth. So you could just keep going with that, but the idea is that these are the perfect squares, and you know, there also includes 36, 49, stuff like that. But I'm just going to write up to 5 squared because we're going to try to see which of these perfect squares fits into negative 125. So we are going to try negative 125 divided by any of these. I'm going to try 25. And I see that negative 125 divided by 25 gives me negative 5. So negative 5 is a whole number, which means we now know that 25 fits in perfectly into this number inside our radical, which is called the radicand, by the way. So square root of negative 125 can be rewritten as square root of negative 25 times the square root of 5, because 5 times 25 equals 125. Now we know, so we split it up into 2 pieces. Negative 25 multiplied by 5. And so the square root of negative 25, which is right over here, well, we know that the square root of positive 25 is 5, but this is a negative number, so we have to say 5i. Once again, the square root of negative 1 is I. I is the imaginary number because up until this point, you haven't really done square roots of negatives. We always said they don't exist, but now we came up with the square root of a negative number is going to have I in it. And I know it sounds useless to you, but I swear your computer that you're doing the Zoom through and your cell phone that you have, those things wouldn't work if they didn't come up with I. Like pretty much all the technology we use nowadays relies on the imaginary number I. It sounds really weird, but it's there. So we have square root of negative 25 gave us 5i, and this is multiplied by the square root of 5. Sorry, that was really ugly looking, but that is your final answer. 5i square root of 5. Are there any questions? Let's keep going. So I'm going to type in the answer, which is 5i square root of 5, and then submit. If you're wondering how to type I literally press I on my keyboard, okay? All right, let's do one more problem next. And then, well, that's the exact same problem. Thanks a lot, Delta Math. Another. That's the exact same problem again. Okay, there we go. I don't know why it gave me the same problem 3 times in a row, but that was weird. Okay, let's annotate. So we got negative 27 inside of a square root. So let's think about what perfect squares fit into negative 27. So once again, your perfect squares are 1, 4, 9, 16, and so on and so forth. I'm not going to keep writing them. You could keep going if you wanted to, but essentially these are your perfect square numbers. And so we're going to think which of these can fit into negative 27. So off the bat, I can see that one of these numbers will fit, but let's pretend I don't know. So I'm just going to try from the biggest one. So 16, let's pretend I don't know which of these perfect squares fits into negative 27. So what you can do is you just try it out. Like literally just try it out, because you're not always going to know which numbers are going to fit into your Radicand. You just want to try things out. So let's pretend I don't know, right? I'm going to try out 16. So negative 27 divided by 16 gives me negative 1.6875. And that's not a whole number, so this is not going to work. So if you don't know, you just try it, and then it doesn't work, then you just move on to the next number. Let's try 9. So then this gives me negative 3. And now, oh yeah, this is a whole number, so that works. So now we know that 9 fits into negative 27. So I'm going to rewrite negative 27 as negative 9 times positive 3, because 9 times 3 will give us 27. And I just put the negative with the 9 because we're going to square root it to get the I out of it. So let me scroll down a little bit. Oh, I guess that doesn't quite help me. Well, okay, I guess there's no scrolling. I'll just write really low. Okay, so the square root of negative 9, well, it's a negative number, so I'm going to get an I out of it. And then the square root of 9 is just 3. So the square root of negative 9 is 3i. And so that's where the 3i comes from, because the square root of 9 is 3, and the square root of a negative gives you I. Oh, sorry, I forgot to put a square root over this. So it's 3i square root of 3 is your final answer. Earlier, I forgot to put a square root here, so I need the square root because we have the square root of negative 27, which can be split into the square root of negative 9 times the square root of 3. And then so the negative 9, when you square root it, it gives us 3i. And then the square root of 3, you just bring it down. You don't change that. Okay, so I'm going to pause this video, see if you guys have any questions. Let's type in our answer. 3i square root of 3. I know it looks messy, sorry. I would have shared from my iPad to make it cleaner, but my iPad wouldn't share screen today. Okay, so we got it right. as expected. If you need more examples, you can always go look at the show example button. You can also watch the help video. Also, we have notes from it from before, like M4T2. This is before break. We did this category before. So if you need more help, go refer to those, and then you can also call me over at the end.